out of Russia. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. So, I guess in watching the last presentation, I was thinking again how a lot of what Bacchus was talking about and what I'm going to talk about is creating narratives and storytelling, really, and who is able to tell a better story, both at home and abroad. What I'm going to talk about first is what I think a lot of us have been gaining greater awareness about, which is obviously Russia's propaganda efforts abroad. I asked Isvan last night how much he felt this had seeped into the general consciousness and how much I had to go into detail. I think probably a lot of us have been hearing about it the last few years. Since I only have 10 minutes, I'm not going to go into much detail about that, except to say I would really recommend reading the document that was sent around before we all met here by the Institute of Modern Russia and the Interpreter. I think there's a very good explanation. If I could just quote from the first paragraph to summarize. The Kremlin exploits the idea of freedom of information to inject disinformation into society. The effect is not to persuade, as in classic public diplomacy, or earn credibility, but to sow confusion via conspiracy theories and proliferate falsehoods. So I think that puts it pretty accurately. And just this past Saturday in Prague, where I live, we had a panel discussion about this. And we were focusing very much on the Kremlin strategy in the near abroad, the different narratives that are trying to be told, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But what happened was there were a bunch of Westerners there, Americans and others, and we were focusing really on this side of things, this abroad, what the Kremlin is trying to do. And then those who are actually from Eastern Europe, there were people there from Georgia, from Moldova, and other countries said, wait a minute, you have to remember that this is the narrative being told abroad. At home, we're still subjected to kind of the old-style propaganda. And I think nowadays people are really concentrating on these new forms, and I'm going to do that as well. But it's very much worth keeping in mind that there are at least 2 and probably 3 narratives that authoritarians are using today to get their message across. So, at home, this TV, especially TV and state media, it's a mix of consumerism, nationalism, anti-Americanism that is being constantly pushed at populations. There's a very good report done recently by a Slovak group, which is called Memo 98, which analyzed Russian TV broadcasting. A lot of us have kind of known, right, this is the propaganda message being pushed at Russians at home, but they did a very thorough analysis looking at the content and the message. And just very briefly, not surprisingly, it was all about a Western plot to bring Russia to its knees, escape the international sanctions and other pressure on Russia, was trying to drive Russia into poverty. This was all led by America, and Russia would survive. There are also a lot of World War II programs being shown these days. There's obviously comparisons between World War II era and what's going on today. So that's at home. Then we have the message in the near abroad, which, as I said, we were told, and I think this is true, it's still a lot of the hard propaganda similar to the past. Similar to what's being done in Russia, but probably done in other ways as well. A lot of it is about, based on conservative values, cultural values, the West corrupting local values. There was someone there from Georgia who spoke about an encounter he had with someone recently who had expressed very pro-Russian attitudes. The guy had said that young Georgians were being sent by the Allies to Afghanistan, but these were only straight Georgians, that the gays were specifically being left at home in order to prevent Georgian society from reproducing. And all of this was to destroy Georgian society. So the Georgian asked this guy, where did you hear that? And he again said, TV, like Russian. So this narrative is very frequent and is also shaping public opinion among the pro-Russian minorities in these near-abroad states. Then we get to Central and Eastern Europe, where it's another narrative, partly what I was discussing before, but much more subtle, much more using alternative types of media, using internet sources to influence public opinion. There was a recent study done, just to read very quickly about this. A young Slovak woman analyzed the Czech and Slovak pro-Russian media. And these are not mainstream, I should say, but they're growing more and more in popularity. She analyzed all the claims across them, and these were the number of narratives that appeared in all 4 cases she looked at. So about the U.S. The U.S. wants to dominate the world and aims to control every nation, constantly initiating and sowing the seeds of conflict globally and behind all the color revolutions. But the U.S. is in decline, and its global hegemony is collapsing. All interventions, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, were a failure, and the U.S. is therefore responsible for global terrorism. NATO and the EU are initiators of aggression. They are alien powers that are disadvantageous to the Czech and Slovak republics and also about to collapse. So I could go on and on, but I think you get the idea. And who knows if this is being coordinated, but the message is strikingly similar across all of these media. So the same goes, I don't want to just focus on Russia, because I think Azerbaijan is a very important case to bring up also. Again, I don't have time to go into it in detail, but again, there it's about 2 very different narratives. At home, every critic of the regime is being silenced, especially before the European Games, which is supposed to start on June 12th, I believe. But at the same time, there's an international campaign for international consumption going on to say that the campaign at home is not really happening. So that's all about Azerbaijan, as I think most of you know, being portrayed as a Western ally, a secular democracy, a reliable energy partner, millions and millions of dollars being spent on lobbying efforts for this. So it's not just Russia, it's Azerbaijan, other authoritarian regimes. I had in my in the title for this talk also about the new tricks with social media and the internet that authoritarians are using. I think by now most of us probably know about the trolling going on. There have been some articles recently about the trolling factories in places like St. Petersburg, where young Russians are paid for going on different internet sites and offering pro-Russian opinion, but it's done in a very sophisticated way where one person will go on and start a debate, and other people will join into the debate, and there'll be more of a discussion, which in the end it comes out in favor of Russia, but it's not simply going and saying Russia is always right. The thing is, though, I want to say just one of my closing remarks. My organization is a media development organization. We do a lot of training in social media, new media, especially in repressive countries. That said, there are limitations. I mean, this is helping. Different voices are getting out there. But one thing that has come out still is that TV is incredibly powerful. In Russia, Azerbaijan, most of these countries. So it's easy to focus on new media and think it will solve all our problems. But TV is still what the majority of populations watch, and that's where they get the propaganda directly. The internet too, I mean, we all love it, but it's also rather chaotic. And there are a lot of different voices there, and it's really hard to see all those voices somehow coming together to counter the propaganda in such an effective way. So, to conclude, one of the things I think which I wanted to stress right now is that we are at a stage where this problem is being mapped out. For a number of years, I think we've all known about the new tricks being done, the new narratives being told. We've been wringing our hands and talking about, well, what do we do about it? It's terrible. The Kremlin obviously is investing millions of dollars, as their government has millions, but what can be done? So that's happened for a couple of years. I think now, the last 6 months or so, we're in a stage of people actually mapping it out and bringing concrete numbers and concrete reports. As some of you might know, the European Endowment for Democracy commissioned a report paid for with Dutch money on how to challenge Kremlin domination in the Russian language media space. They had about 50 experts come up. They produced a report. The preliminary conclusions were released in Riga, and we're hoping that the full report will be released publicly soon. So they had a number of recommendations to establish different content factories, as they call them, produce high-quality Russian language journalism, and other things to support quality journalism out there. But other than that, we haven't seen really organized action yet. Luckily, a lot of the early ideas were to invest millions of dollars into something like Russian TV, RT, to counter the propaganda, create another big propaganda site. Luckily, both on the European and on the American side, that seems to have been rejected. So the idea is now to use more creative ways to counter the propaganda. But I still feel, just in talking to people, there's a lot of wringing the hands still, but not so many solutions that have been brought up to counter this and to really start to change public opinion in a more positive direction. So I think I'll end it there.